If you have ever walked into a wood with an axe in your hand, friend, the most dangerous thing between those trees is not the boar. It is the branch above your head that nobody thought to check. Picture 1862, a stand of oak on the edge of the Forest of Dean, smoke rising thin and grey from a charcoal hearth down the slope. 16 men working the felling that week, a wagon on the track below. One man kneels at the base of an ash, pointing up into the canopy, beard grey, coat heavy with the morning damp. He is not pointing at a boar track in the bracken. He is pointing at a limb, dead white where the bark has gone, hanging loose in the fork above the man swinging the axe beneath it. That is the woodland myth that killed more frontiermen than wild boars ever did. Not the boar, the tree above their own two heads. Not the tusks in the undergrowth. The deadwood in the canopy nobody looked up to find. The myth is simple, and it has always been simple, which is why it still kills men who would tell you they know better. The idea that if a tree is standing upright, it is safe. Old Tom, my grandfather, had a name for the opposite of that myth. He called it timber judgment, not a course, not a certificate. A way of reading a tree before you ever lift a blade to it, the thing this film hands back to you tonight, whole and free. By the time we are done, you'll be able to walk up to a standing tree, take 5 minutes, and tell whether it is safe to cut, which way it truly wants to fall, and where you should never stand while it does. You will know what a hung-up tree looks like before it moves. You will know the sound a tree makes in the last second before it lets go. Nobody bills you for that knowledge. No man comes round in a van to check your certificate is still in date. Nobody can take it back off you once you have earned it, and that is why it was let go quiet, one generation at a time. If every chainsaw in this country went silent tomorrow, could you still bring a tree down safely with your own 2 hands and your own 2 eyes? Most grown men could not tell a tree merely leaning from a tree about to come down on their heads. Their own grandfathers could read it from 30 feet without breaking stride. Tap subscribe before we go further, friend. Not for me, neighbor. We are putting one buried skill back into the daylight every week now, and there is another one already waiting next week that they would rather you had never picked back up. There are 7 pieces to timber judgment, and I am going to hand you every one tonight. Most men who walk into a wood with an axe or a saw get 3 of these wrong without knowing it, right up until the day it matters. The first 4, old Tom would have taught you on a Sunday afternoon before dinner. Condition, lean, the hang, the spring. After that it gets harder. Weather and ground, which argue louder than your own judgment. The retreat path, planned before you ever swing a blade. And the 7th, not really about the tree at all, is the one nobody teaches any longer, and it is the one that does the killing. So the question tonight is not what your granddad knew that you do not, friend. It is who profited the day you stopped knowing it, and how you take it back before the next storm season. My name is Alfred Ashworth. My family has kept a strip of land on the edge of the Forest of Dean since 1790, and every man of us since has cut his own fuel and mended his own fences out of that same tree line. My grandfather, old Tom, raised me after my father went down in a felling accident on that ground, and before he died he made me copy out everything he knew into a leather notebook, because a memory dies with a man and a notebook does not. There is a trade that does well out of you never learning any of this. I call them the chainsaw men, the equipment men, and certificate men and call-out men, all selling the same promise. That danger goes away once you buy enough kit or pay enough for the right ticket. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. The first piece is condition, and old Tom always started here. Before you ask which way a tree leans, you ask what state it is in from root to crown. I can see him now, one gloved hand flat against the bark, head tilted back, working his eyes up the trunk slowly. He is not watching for a boar in the bracken. He is watching for deadwood, bark gone loose and papery, a crown thinner on one side, fungus at the base shaped like a shelf, telling you the heart of that tree may have already gone soft inside while it stands green outside. The method is 3 checks, always the same order. Look up first, at the crown, for any dead limb hanging loose, what the old woodsman called a widow, for what it does to a woman waiting at home. Look down second, at the base, for fungus, cracking, soil lifted on one side as though the roots are losing their grip. Listen third, palm flat against the bark, for any hollow give or solid wood ought to answer back. Look up, look down, listen last. Say that before every tree, every time. The Health and Safety Executive publishes almost exactly this order of check for anyone working near trees professionally today. That is the modern side confirming what the old side already knew, long before there was ever an executive to write it down. Here is how the skill got lost. Nobody banned looking up at a tree. Through the 1950s and 60s, coal gave way to gas pipes straight into the house, and wood that had been daily fuel for every cottage on that forest's edge stopped being anybody's business. Fewer families cut their own, so fewer fathers taught a son to look up before he swung. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. The failure mode is not the obviously dead tree. It is the one that looks perfectly healthy, carrying one dead widow limb 30 feet up. You will never see unless you tip your head back and look. Do this today. Walk out to any tree on your own ground, stand at the base, and run the 3 checks: up, down, listen, even with no plan to cut a thing. The second piece is lean, and this is the one that looks like plain common sense and is not. Picture old Tom walking a slow half circle around the beech before he touched it, working out where the true weight of that tree sat, not where the trunk merely looked straight. A tree can stand bolt upright and still carry most of its weight to one side in the crown, the way a man can stand square on his feet and lean from the waist without noticing. The method: check the crown first, because that is where the weight truly lives, never the trunk. Check the ground second, for roots lifted or cracked on the uphill side. Check the wind third, because a tree that has stood for decades against the prevailing westerly will have grown extra wood on that side, and that wood pulls it hard the other way the moment you cut it free. Ground decides, roots confirm, wind corrects. Say it in that order, every tree. The Forestry Commission's own felling guidance puts crown assessment ahead of trunk angle, because trunk angle lies to the eye far more often than the crown does. That is the modern side confirming what the old side already knew. The erosion here runs alongside the last piece. As professional felling took over, ordinary families were steered toward buying fuel wood already cut and split, arriving by lorry rather than by axe, and reading a tree's lean belonged to fewer households with every decade. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. I was 14 the year I learned this properly. I picked a birch I was certain leaned due east, cut my notch without checking the crown, and old Tom stopped me with one hand on my shoulder. He walked me round to the west side, pointed up at a crown twice as heavy as the trunk suggested, and said, "The tree will not lie to you, lad, you just weren't asking it the right question. I have never forgotten that." The failure mode is trusting the trunk and skipping the crown. Do this today. Practice the half circle on any large tree, eyes on the crown, and see whether your guess and the crown's answer disagree. The third piece is the hang. Some trees do not fall at all when you cut them. They hang, and old Tom said more men in his father's day died from a tree that did not fall than from one that did. A hung-up tree is one cut clean through but caught in the branches of its neighbor on the way down, standing there tilted, held up by a few inches of tangled branch, looking as though it has stopped. It has not stopped, it is waiting. The method: first, never walk beneath a hung tree. Second, judge the direction it will finally go by the angle it is already leaning. Third, bring it down from a safe distance by winch or rope, never by climbing the tree that caught it. Never stand under the hang. Never climb the catch. Old Tom said that to me more than twice. The Health and Safety Executive lists hung-up trees among the leading causes of death in forestry work to this day, and its guidance is blunt: treat every hung tree as live until it is safely on the ground. That is the modern side confirming what the old side already knew. A hung tree can sit for a day looking perfectly settled before a gust of wind or its own slow settling finally lets it go. It looks finished. It is not. I am not your safety officer friend, and details vary by county. If your equipment came with instructions for a hang-up, follow those too. The failure mode is treating stillness as safety. Do this today. Learn to recognize a hung tree in a hedge line, tilted against its neighbor, and give it a wide path. The fourth piece is the spring, the one old Tom called the quiet killer. Some trees are bent, holding back like a bow already drawn, and nothing about that looks dangerous until the second it is. A spring pole is any piece of wood bent under load, perhaps by a larger tree falling across it, holding that bend the way a longbow holds a full draw. It looks calm, a bent stick lying across a path. Cut it wrong and it does not fall. It releases, all at once, with the whole stored force of that bend, and it can strike a man's face or throat the way a drawn bow strikes whatever stands in front of it the instant the string lets go. The method: first, find where the true tension sits along the bend, usually the outside of the curve. Second, never stand on the inside of that curve, exactly where the wood will travel when it releases. Third, if you must cut it, make a small release cut on the tension side first, from a distance. Find the tension, stand outside the curve, cut from a distance. Every spring, every time. The Health and Safety Executive's forestry guidance names spring poles among the small handful of hazards responsible for a disproportionate share of serious forestry injuries each year, precisely because the danger stays invisible until the cut is made. That is the modern side confirming what the old side already knew from bitter experience. A qualified operator's course on hazard trees can run into several £100, and it is not wasted money. But the judgment itself, once somebody shows you what a loaded piece of wood looks like beside one lying flat, costs nothing beyond paying attention for one honest afternoon. If you have walked past spring poles your whole life without knowing it, friend, that is not on you. The failure mode is treating bent wood as no different from straight wood because it is lying still. Do this today. Before you cut anything lying across another branch, ask whether it is under load. If in doubt, treat it as loaded. The fifth piece is weather and ground, and it has nothing to do with the tree at all, and everything to do with the state of the world around it, which no skill with a blade can argue with. Old Tom would not touch a felling axe on the day the wind gusted above a certain point, nor in the day or two after heavy rain, when the ground goes soft and every root plate loosens its grip a little, without a single branch moving to warn you. The method. First, check the wind before anything else, because wind above a moderate gust changes everything you have learned. Second, check the ground for softness at the base of any tree, pressing your boot heel in to feel the give. Third, wait a full day after heavy rain before felling anything of size, because waterlogged ground is exactly what lets a root plate go without warning. Wind first, ground second, and after rain, wait a day. Old Tom said that line more than any other in the whole notebook. The Met Office's own storm advice to landowners repeats almost exactly this order: wind speed first, saturated ground second, because those two factors together turn an otherwise stable tree into one that can come down with no cutting at all. That is the modern side confirming what the old side already knew from watching whole hedgerows go down in a single wet October. This piece was never taken by a product. It was taken by convenience, because once petrol-driven machinery let a job finish in an afternoon instead of a week, fewer men waited out bad weather, and the old patients for simply not working that day got bread out of the trade. Not a conspiracy, neighbor. Just how markets work. The failure mode is judging only the tree and never the day. Do this today. Before you go near a tree with a blade, check the wind and the ground first. And here is something I would like to know from you tonight, friend, while we sit halfway through this list. This piece was never done the same way twice across this country. On the coast of Cornwall, the men leaned into judging wind off the sea because a gale could turn inside an hour with almost no warning. Up in the Yorkshire Dales, it was the frost that mattered more, ground going hard as iron overnight. And further north, in the Highlands, men judge snow load on a crown as carefully as anything else on this list. So tell me where you are listening from tonight, friend. Put your county down in the comments, or your country if you are further out. I read every one of them. The way this was done in Cornwall was never the way it was done in the Dales, and every so often somebody in the comments knows a version of this I have never heard. Tell me where you are, and tell me if they did it your way where you come from. The sixth piece is the retreat path, the one that decides whether the first five even matter, because it happens before you pick up a tool, and it saves a man's life once everything else has gone wrong. Old Tom drilled this into me before he let me swing a full axe on my own. Before a single cut is made, you choose two paths away from that tree, on the diagonal, never directly behind it, because a tree can kick back off its own stump faster than any man can run in a straight line. You clear both paths before you make the first cut, never after. The method. First, pick two retreat lines at roughly 45 degrees behind the felling direction, never straight back. Second, clear both paths completely before you start. Third, agree the retreat signal with anyone alongside you before the first cut, a single shout so nobody hesitates. Two paths, cleared first, one shout agreed. Every tree, every time. The Health and Safety Executive's felling guidance requires a cleared retreat path as a formal precondition before any professional felling cut, and it places it exactly there, before the cut, never as an afterthought. That is the modern side, confirming what the old side already knew from men who did not walk away. I was 17 the second time old Tom stopped me mid-cut, because I had cleared one path and not the other, certain I would only need the one. He stood beside the second path, arms folded, and waited until I had cleared it properly. Plan for the path you think you will not need, lad, he said, because that is always the one you end up running down. The failure mode is clearing only the path you expect to use. Do this today, even with garden pruning. Before any cut, decide where you would step back to and clear that ground first. Pattern break, friend. Everything so far, your own great-grandmother could have walked you through in one patient afternoon, the same way old Tom walked me through it. What is coming next is the piece that put men in the ground on this edge of the country more than any other mistake on this list. And after that, the piece they needed you to forget hardest because it costs nothing and cannot be sold to you in any shop. Before the last piece, here is something the certificate men never explain properly, because understanding why these things happen makes the caution make sense. Instead of being rules, you simply follow blind. A bent piece of wood, the spring, stores energy the way a longbow stores it when drawn back. Wood is a natural spring, fibers compressed on the inside of the bend and stretched on the outside, holding that shape only because something, a falling tree, the weight of snow, is holding it there. Cut through at the wrong point and you are not felling timber, you are releasing a coiled spring, and it travels toward the inside of that curve faster than any man can outrun over a short distance. Simple physics, scaled up to the weight of a grown man. Root failure works on a different principle, but the two often arrive together in the worst storms this country has seen. Roots do not grip soil the way a nail grips a wall. They spread wide and shallow, holding the tree up like a table on a wide, thin base rather than a deep one. That base holds well in dry ground. After heavy rain, the soil loses much of its strength, and a tree that has stood 50 ordinary winters can come down in one wet one, the whole root plate lifting clean out of the ground, sometimes without a breath of wind to finish the job. This country saw exactly that in October of 1987, when a storm crossed the south of England overnight and brought down an extraordinary number of mature trees in hours, ancient woodland and old parkland alike gone by morning. The ground had taken weeks of rain before that storm arrived, and it was the waterlogged root plates giving way, as much as the wind itself, that brought so many of them down together. Meteorologists still use that night to teach the principle old Tom taught me with his own boot heel pressed into wet soil, that a tree's real weakness often lies underground, invisible. Understanding that is worth more than any leaflet, because once you know a tree can fail from below with no warning above, you stop trusting stillness and start reading the ground as carefully as the tree itself. The seventh piece, the last one, is not really about the tree at all. It is about you, and whether you are willing to walk away from a cut you have already started, the moment something tells you it is wrong. Old Tom called it the listening, and he meant it in the widest sense, not merely your ears but everything at once. The birds going quiet for no reason you can see, a creak from the trunk that does not match the angle you expected, your own gut going tight before your mind works out why. He always said the wood tells you before it happens if you are willing to hear it and stop. The rule in 3 lines, the way old Tom wrote it in the notebook: 1. If the sound changes, stop the cut. 2. If the animals go quiet or bolt, stop the cut. 3. If any part of you hesitates, stop the cut. In the winter of 1958, old Tom wrote in that same leather notebook that he had walked away from more good trees half-cut than he had ever walked away from bad ones, and underlined it twice. Because a man's own pride is the last thing that ever wants to stop a cut once it has started. I have read that page more times than any other in the book. The Health and Safety Executive's own guidance for lone forestry workers today says almost the same thing, that any change in sound, movement, or animal behavior near a working tree is sufficient reason to stop work and reassess, no further evidence required. That is the modern side confirming, nearly word for word, what an old man with a leather notebook worked out alone, a lifetime before anybody wrote a safety manual. This is the piece that was never sold to you, friend, because nobody can put a price on a man's willingness to stop halfway through his own work and admit the tree is telling him something he had not planned for. There is no course for humility. There is no certificate for listening to your own gut over your own pride. That is why it was the first piece to go quiet, because everything else on this list can be written on a laminated card, and this piece cannot be handed to anyone at all. It has to be lived into, the hard way, same as old Tom lived into it. Go back now to that man kneeling at the base of the ash on the edge of the forest of Dean, pointing up into the canopy, beard grey, coat heavy with the morning damp. He was never afraid of the wood in front of him. He had already read the crown, judged the lean, checked for a hang, checked for a spring, waited out the wet ground, cleared his own retreat path, and he was standing there listening, one more time, before he let the axe fall. Every piece on this list was already inside that one quiet gesture, and now every piece of it is inside you too. Here is the whole of it, quick, the way old Tom ran through it on a Sunday before dinner. Condition first, look up, look down, listen. Lean second, crown decides, roots confirm, wind corrects. The hang third, never stand under it, never climb the catch. The spring fourth, find the tension, stand clear of the curve. Weather and ground fifth, wind first, ground second, wait a day after rain. The retreat path sixth, 2 lines cleared before the first cut. And the listening last, stop the moment the sound, the animals, or your own gut tells you to. That is the whole method. That is the skill your great-grandmother's father lived by without a second thought, and the skill men on this edge of the country died without, one widow limb and one spring pole at a time. And now it is yours. This was never about trees, friend. It was about the difference between a man who can walk into his own woodland and read it for himself, and a man who has to pay somebody else, every time, to feel safe under his own hedge-line. This is not nostalgia, and it is not some grim warning. It is only ordinary competence, The kind every working family on this edge of the country carried as a matter of course, right up until it became easier to buy the feeling of safety than to learn the judgment beneath it. That is what got taken from you, quietly, one convenience at a time. That is what you took back. You do not have to master all 7 pieces this week, friend. Do one. Walk out to a single tree on your own ground and do the first check, up, down, listen, and nothing more. Your granddad knew all of this. He carried it the same way his father carried it before him. Somebody, somewhere along your own line, did not get the chance to hand it down to you, and that is what I was here for tonight. If this is the kind of thing you want kept alive, subscribe, friend, because we go looking for one more of these every week, and the next one is already half written in the old notebook. Did your own grandparents keep woodland, or a hedge line, or a garden with a few old trees in it? Did anyone teach you to look up before you picked up a saw? Or did that piece not make it down to you either? Tell me in the comments, because the skill that gathers the most stories is the one I go deep on next. Next time, the 2-penny pantry skill that put a whole industry out of business, and the year they made certain you forgot it was ever there to begin with. Keep the old ways. They kept us.